She fed 2 alien children in the dark belly of a dead station, and the stars answered. When the first warship shadowed the moon, she wondered if a queen mother ever repaid kindness with fire. The elf woman called herself Mara Ellerin because the old names had too much history. And anywhere history piled up, danger followed. On the rim of a ringed gas giant, her courier skiff floated like a seat on the wind, docking clamps kissing the ribs of a derelict research station. The station's lights were cold. Its bones creaked in vacuum. It looked abandoned by reason itself. Mara's dragon stirred on her shoulders as she cycled the airlock. Ember, the bronze hatchling, flexed her tiny wings and hissed at the smell of stale air. Kestrel, midnight blue and watchful, curled his tail around the clip of Mara's vest. They were not myth, not quite. Bioforged, feather-scaled, heat-sipping designed as companions in centuries. They chose Mara years ago and had never left. She stepped into the corridors and listened. The station's silence was not empty. It had a grain to it, like sand moving under ice. Her ears, long and tapered, sensitive as harp strings, caught a faint tapping, then a scurry, then nothing. The beam of her lamp stroked the walls, painting out old warning glyphs, a cracked viewport, a child's drawing tucked beneath magnetic tape. 2 circles with stick figures. One larger figure with a crown of dots. Kestrel chittered and leaned his head toward the left passageway. "I hear it," Mara said, voice low. "Easy." She followed the sound past a broken medbay, past lockers dusted in freeze-dried frost, into a storage compartment where shadows collected like leftover grief. There, behind a crate stamped with an unfamiliar crest, she found them, 2 small shapes, thin arms wrapped around even thinner knees. Eyes reflective and too large for their faces. They stared at Mara. At her ears, at the dragons, at the tool belt crowded with cutters and sealant foam. Their skin held a faint opal sheen. Their hair was thread-fine and pale, like spun glass. Delicate gill lines trembled along their necks as if they were learning to breathe air that did not belong to them. Ember made a soft gruff sound. Not a threat, almost a question. Mara knelt until her face was level with theirs. She kept her hands where they could see them, and with a practiced motion, unsealed a ration pack. Steam rose with the smell of savory broth and warm bread. The smaller child flinched. The older one did not move at all. "I am Mara," she said. "These are Ember and Kestrel. I will not hurt you." The older child looked at the ration, then at the dragons again, and finally at Mara's eyes. "Hungry?" Mara asked, and shook the pack once so the bread shifted. The older one's gaze flicked back to the bread with raw, naked hunger that needed no translation. Mara placed the pack on the floor and pushed it forward. "For you," she said. "Eat." The younger child mouthed a sound that might have been a word. When the aroma reached them, restraint shattered. Small hands darted, tore bread carefully in halves, then in quarters, then in patient crumbs that they shared evenly. They ate without noise, as if the station might punish them for joy. "Where are your adults?" Mara asked softly. The older one tapped their chest. "Ari," they said, and then touched the younger one. "Soul." Their accent smoothed vowels into something lilting, almost sung. They pointed to the child's wrist where a bracelet of hexagonal stones glowed faintly. Mara touched her own chest in answer. "Mara," she waited, and when the warmth of the ration pack faded, she opened another and set it between them. The dragons watched, interested but respectful. Ember's throat pulsed with heat she did not release. Kestrel kept his head turned toward the corridor, listening, the way a sailor listens to wind. "Station is empty," Mara said, half to herself. "So why leave children behind?" Ari glanced toward the ceiling, as if the answer lived somewhere above. "Hide," Ari whispered. The word hung in the stale air, fragile and sharp. "Warships." Mara's pulse flickered. She had flown in the wakes of fleets and knew what warships did to places that could not defend themselves. "Whose?" Ari's eyes brightened. Their fingers traced a crown shape in the dust, then a long curve beneath it, like a great fin or a cloak. Matriarch, Ari said. Queen Mother. The drawing was simple, but it matched the tape child's art in the hallway. The crowned figure. The circles. Mara's stomach tightened. She had not heard that title spoken in any of the common tongues, but it carried weight. A gravity that pulled imagination into orbit around it. She considered leaving. Just for a breath, the way people consider jumping when they stand at the edge of a great height. She could carry the children to her skiff and burn for the shadow side of the planet. Let the storms hide her. But something in Ari's composure and in Saul's shaking hands trying to slow for the last crumbs. Retreat feel like cruelty. Mara unclipped a thermal wrap and draped it around both children. The dragons leaned close, radiating gentle warmth. You are safe, she said. At least while you are with me. Kind, Ari murmured. As if naming a species rather than an act, kindness had always cost Mara something. Time, energy, the righteous ability to walk away and say the universe did this. Not me. Let's move, she said. My ship is small, but the air is clean and I can get you help. They stood awkwardly. Soul reached for Ember, then hesitated. Ember solved the problem by stepping forward and bumping her nose against Saul's palm. A warm touch like a living coal, made gentle. Soul smiled, tiny and fierce, and for a moment the station felt less like a tomb. They walked the corridor in a thin line, Mara ahead. Ari and Soul in the middle, dragons bracketing past the broken med bay and the empty lockers. At the junction, Kestrel froze. The spines along his neck lifted. He clicked twice, a code Mara knew. Something outside. Hold, she said, hand raised. She eased forward and leaned to the viewport, where glass had cracked but not surrendered. The gas giant's rings had shifted to a pale blade across the black. And in that blade, a shape moved sleek, angular, perfectly indifferent to the beauty it cut through. A ship, yes. But not one of the scavenger guild. Not corporate patrol. Something grown rather than built, its hull fretted with patterns like shells layered in secret. It slid between ring particles without sparking any, as if gravity itself stepped back for it. Ari's breath hitched. Scout, Ari said, voice barely more than breath. Matriarch's eye. The communicator on Mara's wrist buzzed. A packet arrived without greeting, without handshake. Her skiff's system translated a symbol and displayed a single word. Acknowledged. Mara felt the meaning like a weight on her sternum. Acknowledged for what? For touching the station? For breathing? For feeding? Back to the ship, she said, and kept her voice calm. Quietly. They moved. In the docking bay, Mara felt the station vibrate with the approach of something larger. The scout's shadow crossed the viewport and kept going. Her skiff's lights glowed like a promise she was almost afraid to believe. She hustled Ari and Soul up the ramp, sealed the hatch, and threw power to life support and shields. The dragons took their places near the cockpit, bodies low, eyes gleaming. Her console bloomed with warnings. Objects inbound, multiples. The computer tried to count, gave up, offered an integer with too many zeros to be sensible. She switched to long-range visuals and saw them, specks at first, then blades. Then cathedral shapes that burned starlight along their ribs as they fell into formation. Ari looked from the screen to Mara, reading the line between fear and resolve. We called, Ari said, voice small and proud at once. We sent our hunger. She hears. Who? Mara asked, though she already knew. Ari touched the bracelet. The hex stones pulsed in a rhythm that matched Mara's racing heart. Queen Mother. The first of the warships settled from faster-than-light to real space, with the quiet of a leviathan in deep water. Then another. Then dozens. Their arrangement formed a spiral, each vessel the size of a city block, each alive with bioluminescent patterns that shifted as if speaking. 10,000? Mara whispered, unable to stop herself, not sure whether she was counting or praying. It felt absurd. It felt exactly like the kind of number only a child would say, and only a matriarch could make real. The sensors ticked upward with a relentless patience. On the come, another packet landed. This time no translation came. Instead, the skiff's speakers hummed with a chord so low it seemed to vibrate the air into a second atmosphere. Saul's eyes filled with tears. Ari straightened, as if the sound unspooled steel inside their small frame. Kindness acknowledged. The console finally wrote in clumsy script. Audience granted. Mara glanced at the children she had fed, and then at the fleet that had arrived to claim them. She thought of all the times kindness had cost her. Then she wondered what it might buy. She set the skiff to standby and reached for the manual controls, because some choices needed a human hand. "All right," she said, steady as a drawn bow. "Let us see what a queen mother considers fair." Outside, the spiral tightened, luminous and patient, as if an empire were taking a breath. The dragons crawled closer to the viewport, their reflections small against the immensity of the approaching war. And in the heart of the formation, something vast moved too slow to be anything but deliberate, too beautiful to be anything but terrible, turning its many eyes toward the kindness that had summoned it. The fleet arranged itself like a living equation, symbols of light shifting across hulls grown from some cathedral-deep reef. The spiral narrowed until the skiff floated inside a radiant well, and the gas giant's rings turned to a distant whisper of glitter on the edge of vision. Mara felt the pressure of attention the way a diver feels water close around a suit, weightless and heavy at once. "Audience granted," her console had written. No hail, no coordinates. Only the tone, a vast chord that seemed to shake dust from the station's bones. Ari and Sol stood close together, the thermal wrap pooled at their feet. Ember and Kestrel kept watch from the dashboard, bodies low, eyes bright. The dragons were quiet, but their silence was not fear. They were listening, as if the chord carried flavors only their senses could taste. "Show me the path," Mara said to the air. Not sure if she spoke to machines or queens. The bracelet on Ari's wrist brightened and projected a thin plane of light into the musty cabin. Symbols unfurled, curved and interlaced, then resolved into a diagram, a corridor of empty space threading the spiral's heart to a single immense form at its center. The corridor pulsed once. "Protocol," Ari whispered. "Walk in patience." Mara eased the skiff forward. Thrusters flickered. The guiding corridor met her motion like a river meeting a hand gentle, inevitable. As they entered the spiral's throat, nearby warships altered their bioluminescent scripts. Constellations of dots became sweeping crescents, then lines that rose and fell in measured rhythm. Ember's head cocked. Kestrel's tail tightened around a hook. "There." "Singing," Mara said. The word felt childish and exactly right. A second chord joined the first higher, braided through with tremolo. The skiff's windows faintly misted, not with condensation, but with patterns like breath against glass. Words formed and unraveled in quick succession. Measure, witness, and then a symbol her translator could not parse. Marked only as sacred, the corridor opened into a cavern of light and mass. The central ship, no, not a ship, something more like a living city hung motionless. Its surface layered in slow-moving plates, translucent as moon jelly, beneath which deeper structures pulsed like a sleeping heart. Along its flank, an aperture irised open, a petal inviting the bee. Mara anchored the skiff in the approach lane and steadied her hands on the manual controls. "Stay close," she told Ari and Sol. "No sudden moves." The aperture welcomed them into a chamber the size of a sports field, its floor a mesh that flexed without yielding. Organ light emanated from living pillars that rose like tree trunks, then twisted into vaulted arches. A haze hung in the air, warm and faintly sweet, like the smell after lightning finds a pine grove. A shape coalesced from the light. Not a body, not fully. A projection woven from particles, its edges soft as fog. It stood tall, its outline shifting through ancestral forms. A crowned silhouette, a great fin, a cloak of night with a constellation for a face. When it spoke, it did not use a mouth. You fed ours. The voice was many voices layered, almost a chorus yet clear. Who taught you the cost of hunger? Mara's throat felt raw. Experience, she said. And an old promise. The figure turned slightly, as if to study the dragons. Ember's chest warmed. Kestrel flattened his ears and let his tongue taste the air. The figure's light brightened in a way that meant approval. Or curiosity. Your kind wrap teeth in kindness, the voices said. We know teeth. We will test the wrap. Ari flinched. Soul pressed closer to Mara. The word test snapped the moment tight. Mara let out a breath and folded her fears into a manageable shape. I accept a test, she said. On my terms. Something like amusement moved through the chamber, a shimmer across the high arches. Name them, the voices said. First, Mara said, the children remain with me. Second, no harm comes to my companions. Third, the test has purpose beyond spectacle. Agreed, the voices said, so quickly that she felt the trap lines around her shift. Begin. The mesh floor rippled. Out from the far wall, 4 constructs extruded like sculptures handling their own birth. They were small, the size of wolves. Their bodies were segmented and pale, with delicate frond limbs instead of legs and lantern organs glowing inside their thoraxes. Their faces were blunt, eyeless, ringed with gill crowns like the children's like Ari's and Saul's, but wrong. Empty. The husks of our fallen, the voices said. Re-knit for trial. They seek the pulse that fed the hungry. They will separate it from the world. Keep what you claim to protect. The constructs flowed forward in silence, moving with unsettling grace. Ember hissed and stepped between the constructs and the children. Kestrel sprang to Mara's shoulder and dug in just enough to anchor them both. Mara lifted her hands slowly, unarmed, and took one step back to widen the distance between the children and the approaching forms. Remember the terms, she said. No harm, the voices echoed. We measure without breaking. The first construct extended a frond limb toward the thermal wrap. Ari didn't move, jaw set with a courage that made Mara's chest hurt. Soul trembled, but kept their palms open, empty. Mara knelt, bringing her eyes level with the lantern glow within the construct's chest. She could see the organ's pulse a faint, steady rhythm. What do you seek? She asked a dot it could not answer, but it adjusted its angle until the lantern light cast a halo around the children. The fronds tasted air like hands reading Braille. Another construct circled, and a third lifted itself by the ceiling and dripped down behind. Ember flickered her throat, warming the air to discomfort. Kestrel lowered his head, a warning. Mara realized the test was not a fight. It was a calculus of boundaries that she let the dragons posture, then spoke softly. Ember, she said. The hatchling stilled. Kestrel. His tail loosened. Mara reached into her vest and drew out the same kind of ration she'd offered in the station, though her hands wanted a weapon. She broke the bread cleanly into 3 pieces. She set one in front of the first construct, one before the second, and one between Ari and Soul. The constructs paused. They had no mouths, but the lantern organs brightened, flare after measured flare, in time with the children's breathing. The air hummed like a harp string plucked and left to sing. Kindness feeds or frees? The voices asked. Both, Mara said. It feeds those you love and frees you from the person who can walk away. The first construct extended its fronds and gently nudged the bread toward Ari. The second did the same with Saul's portion. The third brushed its fronds over Ember's scales, reading heat, then withdrew. The fourth settled opposite Mara and lowered its head, as if offering a bow dot in the high arches. Something changed. The light deepened, like a sunrise moving through water. Measure complete, said the voices. Your terms were kept. Your nature observed. Mara stood, shoulders aching from holding fear still. And your purpose? She asked out, the figure's edges sharpened. For a moment, the projection wore a face ancient, beautiful, terrible, the suggestion of eyes old as tide. We have lost daughters, the voices said. We sent them to study the quiet places where war had not yet reached. They did not return. We followed hunger to you. Ari's voice shook. We hid, they said. We called, we heard. The figure tilted, the effect like a planet nodding. You will carry their message for us. Your kind moves where ours is met with cannon and fear. You will go to the place of their silence, speak with a throat that hasn't burned us, and return with truth. Mara thought of all the bargains she had refused and the few she had kept even when it nearly broke her. You have 10,000 warships, she said. Why send 1 elf and 2 dragons? Because power makes liars of witnesses, the voices answered simply. Because kindness crosses doors that force cannot. Because you fed ours without knowing who watched. Kestrel whistled a note so small, it skated under the hearing bones. Ember touched her snout to Mara's wrist. Ari and Sol looked at Mara with trust that felt like a weight she wanted, not to be free of, but to hold rightly. What if the truth offends you? Mara asked. Then we will be offended, the voices said. Not everything we are is teeth. A corridor unfolded from the chamber's far end, narrow and bright. Symbols tracked along the walls, maps built of spirals and knots. At the corridor's mouth, a sleek craft budded from the living ship's flesh and detached like a seed. Take this tender, the voices said. It will know our gates and whisper our names to those who listen. The place you seek hides in the shadow of a small blue star. 3rd planet, far out, where debris rings its waist like cheap jewelry. Your charts will name it by a corporate code. Our daughters named it Sanctuary. Mara's breath caught. The coordinate projection traced a path through space that brushed the edge of human charts. It crossed a system Mara had only seen in smuggler rumors, a place abandoned after a trade war's silent ceasefire. She turned to the children. Do you come with me? Ari squared their small shoulders. Sol wiped their eyes and nodded. Ember sprang to the tender's ramp. Kestrel followed, tail skimming the mesh, a living compass arrow. Mara looked once more at the figure. If I learn that your daughters were taken by human hands, she said, voice even, I will tell you. But I will first try to end the taking. Measure that kindness against the teeth it will wake, the voices replied. We will listen. The chamber dimmed, not in threat, but like a theater fading to set its scene. The tender's ramp opened, warm light spilling onto the mesh like dawn. Mara guided Ari and Sol aboard and felt the vessel answer her touch with. The tender moved as if it rode this scene between thought and motion, no engine rumble, no inertia thrum, only a smooth drift that felt closer to falling upward. Its walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent veins, as though a heartbeat hid somewhere in the hull. Mara sat at the helm while Ari and Sol watched from a curved seat that looked grown rather than built. Ember sprawled across Mara's lap like an ember-hued scarf, and Kestrel perched on the armrest, wings pressed tight. The starfield stretched before them, then folded. Not a jump. Not a blur. A soft inversion, like passing through a veil of warm water. Mara blinked and realized they were already halfway to the small blue star. Sanctuary without the familiar gut twist of faster-than-light drive. She almost whispered a thank you to no one in particular. Your ships travel differently, she said. Ari nodded. We borrow distance, they said. Not crush it. Borrowing distance felt like the kind of thing power could forget was a privilege. Mara studied the projected path, a silver ribbon stitched through blank space. The tender hummed when she tried to take manual control, not denying her, just reminding her it already knew the way. Sanctuary, she murmured. Why that name? Soul traced a circle on the window with one fingertip. Because we wanted it to hold what we were not allowed to lose. The children spoke with the simplicity of those who have not yet learned to bury meaning inside armor. Mara felt the truth land heavy. The tender banked through a drift of dust and cooling plasma. A faint halo appeared ahead, a debris ring, thin as lace at first, then thickening into jagged orbiting fragments of long-dead metal. Twisted girders, burned cargo hulls, ribs of broken carriers, shattered shielding spines. A graveyard-turned necklace. Mara swallowed. Someone fought to keep sanctuary, she said. Or to own it. Ari stared outward, face empty of expression. They fought to erase it. As the tender slipped closer, a hidden beacon woke. A blue glyph rippled through the debris field, searching, recognizing, confirming. The ring parted like a wound reluctantly reopening, and the tender slid through. Beyond the debris, the light softened. A modest world came into view, verdant greens along its coasts, soft clouds resting over oceans like quilts, never terraformed by human hands. Untouched but not innocent. The tender turned, waiting for Mara's choice of landing. You have been here before? She asked the children. Ari nodded. Soul shook their head. Their answers collided like two truths that never learned to live in the same room. The tender projected a map. A valley, a cliff-walled plateau. A scar that did not belong to weather. Something is buried there, Mara said. Not buried, Ari whispered. Left, the ship eased downward through layers of gentle air. The valley below was quiet in a way that was not natural. No birds. No insect chorus. Even the wind hushed its voice. Moss spread across stone like velvet. Trees leaned inward, trunks arched as though protecting or grieving. When the tender settled, its ramp unfolded with reverence instead of urgency. Mara stepped onto loam soft as fabric. Ember tested the ground with flicking claws, while Kestrel lifted his snout and tasted the silence. Ari touched the moss with something like reverence. This was where they built the listening chambers, Ari said. We were meant to learn what other minds feared. Not with pain, with patience. And then? Mara asked, though she already feared the shape of the answer. Ari did not look at her. They came, they said. They wanted maps of what we heard. They asked questions in iron voices. They took our elders. When they could not name what they did not understand, they made war on it. Human scavenger fleets. Corporate black labs. Military surveys that would call anything unlicensed an anomaly. It didn't matter which uniform. The cruelty stayed the same. Mara felt her jaw lock. Did your queen send soldiers to retrieve them? She sent silence, Ari answered. We do not storm graves. We find why they were dug. There was weight in that philosophy and empire that wielded patience as a blade. The kind of power that could wait centuries for an answer. Mara followed the children toward the plateau wall. Roots thick as ship cables had split the rock along a seam. Between them, a faint seam of bioluminescent residue glowed. The tender lit a small panel beside the crack. The seam widened like a mouth opening after long disuse. Inside lay a corridor carved in smooth, sweeping curves. The air smelled faintly of sea brine and stardust, neither stale nor new, as if preserved by intention. Ember walked ahead, tail low, heat flickering beneath her chest. Kestrel padded silently at Mara's heels. They reached a chamber that opened into a dome. At its center lay a pedestal of grown crystal shaped like overlapping wings. Above it, suspended in midair by threads of unseen force, drifted a cluster of memory orbs, pearled spheres etched with patterns that pulsed faintly. Searching for hands they recognized. Soul reached out, trembled, then drew back. It is theirs, Soul whispered. Not ours anymore. Ari took a slow step forward and pressed both hands to the pedestal. The orbs flickered as though breathing awake. One drifted lower, gently, almost shyly, as if choosing. Mara, Ari said softly. Please stand with me. She did. The orb brightened, then it opened, not physically. Through her eyes, the memory split the air like a mirage, images cast not in static, illusion but living echo. Two adult beings shaped much like the children, tall and regal, walking these same corridors. Teaching, laughing, shaping resonant chords into sculpture. A place of learning, of exchange, of gentle ambition. Then the breach. Metal boots. Human exosuits painted with stripped insignias. Plasma cutters biting through the singing walls. Voices issuing sterile demands for intellectual salvage. Panic. Children hurried into hiding tunnels. Two figures, elders, parents, guardians, refused to kneel. The soldiers fired containment nets, then stun rounds, then something colder. The memory dimmed before the worst. Mercy in omission or avoidance of a trauma too deep to show. Mara breathed hard, hands trembling. The orb pulsed once, grief made visible. They died, Soul said. Not a question. A truth. Taken first, Ari whispered. Died second. Mara touched the pedestal. And your queen does not know how. She suspects, Ari said. But suspicion is not truth. Outside the dome, wind finally found its voice again. As if morning had to move or suffocate, Mara lowered her voice. If humans did this, you should know. Not all of us serve those laws. Ari met her gaze. We know, they said. Because you fed us. A simple explanation. Heavy as an oath, Kestrel gave a low chirr. Ember bristled not from fear, but alertness. Something else waited deeper in the chamber. A second seam of light traced along the far wall, curling downward like a vein leading into the earth. Another archive? Mara asked. Ari shook their head. Not archive, they said. Wound. The scene split and whatever lingered behind it stirred. The dragons went still. The lights dimmed. And from beyond the hidden door, a slow, halting breath rose, as if something long left in darkness had just realized it was no longer alone. The wall opened with the hesitation of an old scar, remembering how it first tore. The scene widened by degrees, layer by layer, until the chamber beyond stood revealed, darker, narrower, shaped like a throat leading downward into the earth. The air carried a different scent here, warmer, coppered, faintly electric, as though the stone itself still remembered pain. Ari did not move forward. Soul pressed closer to Mara's side and ducked their head as though instinct told them to become smaller. Ember let out a soft pulse of heat, not a warning, but a shield. Kestrel's gaze cut into the dark, pupils widening to strips of night. Something waited below. Something alive. Mara tested her voice. What is inside? Ari's throat worked before they answered. The last witness, they said. The one who stayed when all others were taken. A survivor? Mara asked. No, Ari said softly. A sentinel. The difference mattered. Mara drew a slow breath and shifted Ember gently off her lap. The hatchling padded forward, cautious. Kestrel slipped to Mara's shoulder and stayed perched close enough to launch, calm enough not to escalate. Mara rested a hand on Saul's back in silent reassurance. I will go first, she said. Ari hesitated. He may not answer you. Then I will listen anyway. The passage beyond sloped downward, curving like a rib cage. Moss clung to the walls, threaded with faint luminescent veins that pulsed in time with something deeper. The vibrations were faint, felt more than heard, like a sleeping heart waking beneath stone. The deeper Mara went, the warmer the air became, thick with memory and breath. The corridor opened into a cavern hollowed by deliberate hands. At its center lay a colossal form, not a body in the ordinary sense, but a cradle of grown crystal that held a figure suspended in soft restraints of organic silk. The figure's limbs were long, elegant, and gaunt with hibernation. Skin once luminous now dulled to pearl gray. Gills along the neck fluttered unevenly, like flags catching intermittent wind. Eyes closed, but not unconscious. Not dead. Held. Preserved. Waiting. Ari stepped beside Mara. Voice low. He is called Valen. He kept the memory vault when the others fled. He sealed this chamber when soldiers broke the outer walls. He chose to remain when calling for rescue might have led them here. He hid the truth? Mara asked. He safeguarded it, Ari answered, so that someone might live long enough to remember it rightly. The dragons approached the cradle's edge. Ember leaned close first, chest glowing faintly. Kestrel lowered his head and released a tone too low for human ears. But Valen stirred. His eyelids parted slowly, as if each second measured years reclaimed, and his gaze found Mara first. Not the children. Eyes not clouded, not confused. Sharp, present, searching. When he spoke, his voice was sand over velvet. You are not ours, he said. Mara inclined her head, neither humbled nor prideful. No, she answered. But I stand with those who are. He studied her dragons, then the children, then the cracked seam she had entered through. When I sealed this chamber, Valen said, I believed only ruin would ever break it open again. Ruin did not, Mara said. Kindness did. Something flickered through his gaze, mistrust, hope, grief layered like folded paper. He lifted one frail hand. The silk restraints loosened as if obeying an old pact. He sat forward with shaking effort, breath ragged until Ari slipped beneath his arm to brace him. He did not thank them. He did not need to. The moment itself carried gratitude like a current. Tell me, Valen said, voice low, which banner flies in human skies now? Which power rules the rim? No banner, Mara said. All of them fight. None of them heal. The answer landed heavy. Valen's gills flared, a shudder moving through him. Then the ones who came here, those who carried corporate marks like stolen scripture, were not rogues. They were mirrors. Mara felt truth sting behind her ribs. They wanted what you built here, she said. Not who you were. Only what could be taken from it. Valen closed his eyes, but not to retreat. To remember, when they fired on us, he said, they did not do so out of hatred. Hatred would have been smaller. They fired because they believed they were entitled. Because the universe to them is a vault where keys are forged from conquest. Ari bowed their head. So clung to Mara's sleeve. But there was another reason, Valen continued, voice sharpening. They feared sanctuary. And fear is older than greed. Mara frowned. Why fear a listening post? Because sanctuary did not only listen, Valen said. It learned. It mapped the places in other minds where doors could open. And humans some fear doors they cannot own. The cavern pulsed once with low light, like a heartbeat through rock. Vel, and fixed his gaze on Mara again. The Queen Mother sent you because she cannot cross her own history. If she comes herself, they will call it retaliation. They will brand grief as invasion. Then she is wiser than those who provoke her, Mara said. She is older than those who provoke her, Valen replied. Wisdom was how she learned to outlive her enemies. Mara stepped closer. We came to learn what happened. We will carry that truth back. Valen's eyes narrowed. Truth is not carried. It is paid for. A soft tremor rolled through the cavern floor. Ari stiffened, soul backed away a pace. Something is waking. Kestrel crooned. Valen turned his head toward the deepest wall, one more seam hidden beneath roots. It glowed faintly, as if remembering fire. That chamber, Mara said, is not memory. No, Valen said. It is consequence. The seam cracked wider. Stone shed dust. A pulse larger than any. Heartbeat throbbed outward, and something inside answered Valen's stirring. As if it had been waiting for his awakening to justify its own. Valen's voice lowered to a thread. Before they fled, our elders sealed not only their dead. They sealed what could one day defend the living. Mara's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. "What is in there?" she asked. Valen lowered his feet to the floor, strength gathering even through shaking. "Limbs, their last covenant," he whispered. The roots split. Open, bioluminescent light poured through, and something vast began to rise, neither machine nor beast nor vessel, but a fusion of all three unfurling like a forgotten star, answering its summons at last. The chamber bloomed open like a wound learning to become a doorway. Light spilled across the cavern floor in braided tendrils, washing away centuries of silence. The thing rising from the depths was immense, an elegant leviathan of latticework bone grown around living circuitry, its skin a shifting ocean of reflective plates. Not a war beast, not merely a vessel, a guardian dotted unfolded in coils of grace rather than violence, every motion a vow preserved in architecture. Its core glowed with the same inner light as the children's bracelets, but deeper, older, threaded with a resonance that hummed in Mara's bones. Soul fell to their knees. Ari did not kneel, but their breath left them as if they'd been holding it their whole life. Valen stood straighter, as though the guardian's awakening poured marrow back into him. "They called it a covenant frame," he said softly. "A promise given shape. Who does it answer to?" Mara asked. "It answers to receipt of need," Valen said. "Not command. The difference is what saved it from being twisted into someone else's conquest." The guardian lowered its head to examine them. Its eyes were not orbs but layered petals of light, blooming and narrowing like a pulse given vision. Ember crept a step forward, tail high, unafraid. The guardian tilted its crown toward her, almost bowing. And she rumbled back, a reply older than fear. Kestrel's wings trembled with cautious wonder. Mara approached slowly, palms open. "Why now?" she asked Valen, never looking away from the massive form. "Why wake for us?" "It is not waking for us," Valen said. "It is waking because you carry the question the Queen Mother cannot yet speak aloud." Mara understood the shape of that question. Not who took them, not even how they died, but what did their deaths change? Who did their absence make cruel? "Truth carries teeth, so this is a witness," Mara said. "This is a reckoner," Valen corrected, voice barely a whisper. "Not to punish, but to weigh." The guardian extended a panel from its chest, a bloom of crystal petals forming a bowl of light. In its center floated a seed stone, faceted and scarred with old resonance. Mara realized it was not inert. It listened. "Place your memory beside its own," Valen said. "Let it see what shape humanity has become." Mara hesitated not for herself, but for who might speak through her when she opened that door. The hungry, the good, the frightened, the conqueror, the neighbor. The thief humanity was a cathedral with unsteady scaffolding, but truth was still truth. She pressed her palm gently to the hovering stone. The guardian inhaled not with lungs, but with presence. A luminous ripple spread from her hand through its frame, like a bell rung across stars. What the guardian took was not her biography. It took the world through her vantage point, border stations rationing mercy like contraband, freight routes where kindness was a rumor, planets strangled by patents, people who still chose to help anyway. It drank in her doubt and did not flinch. After a long stillness, the guardian folded itself down so its crown hovered barely above her eye level. She thought she saw sorrow there, or gratitude, or both. When it spoke, its voice was not the Queen Mother's deeper, singular, nearly tectonic. "Burden accepted," it said. Ari gasped softly. Soul clutched Mara's hand. Valen's shoulders shook with something that might have been relief. The guardian shifted, and part of its plating unfurled like a ramp or wing. Symbols along its flank glowed, matching the tender's star map, but now the path split into two, a branch of fate diverging. One route led outward to the Queen Mother's fleet. The other cut deeper through forgotten warp corridors to a human frontier outpost. The last known trace of the soldiers who came here. The reckoning would not happen in sanctuary. It would happen at the site of the theft. Valen steadied himself. When you leave this place, you will not return as witness alone. You will carry the right of query, the oldest law we hold. Whoever held the chain of orders that led to this wound must answer before silence can close again. Mara's throat tightened. Will the queen follow? She will wait, Valen said. The mothers do not enter the room until truth stops running. Ari looked at Mara with a trust that weighed more like inheritance than hope. We go with you, they said, because this is our first step back into a world where we are not ghosts. Mara nodded once. Then we go. The guardian stepped past them, massive, slow, reverent. It climbed toward the surface through a seam that parted like a canyon learning new geometry. Daylight spilled inward, answering its ascent as if the sky itself had been holding breath. Valen remained beside the pedestal of memories. I will return to the queen, he said. I will heal in truth, not sleep. Mara bowed her head once in farewell, not courtly, but honest. We will bring you an answer. Do not bring me an answer, Valen said gently. Bring me a future. They emerged into daylight behind the guardian as it rose into the sky like a luminous leviathan, trailing radiance instead of shadow. The tender responded instantly, systems blooming awake like wings called to flight. Mara, Ari, Sol, Ember, and Kestrel boarded. The ramps sealed behind them. Outside, the Covenant frame folded its body through the upper atmosphere, climbing toward the first gate. It did not look like a warship. It looked like a promise that would keep its word. The tender locked onto its wake and followed. Ahead, human space. An outpost wearing someone's guilt like a mask. A wound still bleeding into the quiet places. Behind, sanctuary. Holding its breath one last time, Mara rested her hand over the children's, over the dragon's scales warm at her side, and looked into the widening starfield. Then let the truth stand, she whispered. The gate opened. The mission began, and the reckoning at last was on its way. If you're enjoying this story world and want the next chapter of the reckoning, subscribe now and stay with us through every jump. More HFY sagas are on the way. Your watch keeps this universe alive.